A car sits abandoned on Prince Edward Island. No driver. Blood across the interior. Days later, deep in nearby woods, a leather jacket turns up in a plastic bag, soaked dark with blood that isn't the wearer's own. Tangled in its lining, 20 strands of white hair. Not human. The car belongs to Shirley Duguay, a 32-year-old mother of 5 living in Sunnyside, the second largest town on Prince Edward Island. On October 3, 1994, she vanishes. 4 days later, her car is found a few miles from home. Blood spattered across the interior comes back a match to Duguay herself. She'd been separated from her common-law husband, Douglas Beamish, the father of 3 of her children, for some time. Their 12 years together had been stormy. Beamish had a criminal record, a reputation for violence with women he dated, and neighbors recall hearing the two of them in a screaming argument the night she vanished. 2 years before her disappearance, during an earlier separation, Beamish sent Shirley a letter through her sister. In it, he wrote that he didn't understand why she'd left, that he wanted her back, and that if they couldn't be together, there was no point in living. He said he'd rather kill her, their 3 children, and then himself. The letter, witnesses would later testify, appeared to be signed in blood. Investigators already suspect Beamish completely. But suspicion isn't evidence. 7 months pass with no trace of Shirley Duguay. Then, on May 6, 1995, a man fishing along a riverbank near North Enmore, about 10 miles from where her car was found, notices a pile of brush that looks out of place. He starts clearing it away. Underneath, a shallow grave, and inside it, Shirley's partially decomposed body. Her hands are tied behind her back. Her nose is broken. Her jaw is broken in 3 separate places. One of her own teeth has been driven so hard into her face that it's lodged in her lung. Near the grave, investigators recover that same blood-soaked leather jacket, along with a pair of white sneakers. Beamish's own friends and family recognize the jacket as similar to one he owns. Not one of them will say for certain that it's his. Constable Roger Savoy is working the case, and he notices something everyone else has overlooked: the white hairs caught in the jacket's lining. He remembers that Beamish, currently living with his parents, has access to a white cat. Her name is Snowball. Savoy has an idea nobody has ever tried to turn into courtroom evidence before: match the cat's DNA to the hairs on the jacket, the same way you'd match a human suspect's DNA to blood at a scene. He starts calling labs. Every one of them, in Canada and the United States, tells him essentially the same thing: nobody has ever attempted usable forensic DNA extraction from a domestic animal. Nobody is willing to try. Savoy keeps calling anyway. Eventually he reaches Dr. Stephen O'Brien, chief of the Laboratory of Genomic Diversity at America's National Cancer Institute, a geneticist who has spent decades studying inherited disease in cats, but never once worked a criminal case. O'Brien later recalls the moment Savoy explained what he needed: whether hairs recovered from a blood-soaked jacket, tied directly to a crime scene, could be matched back to one specific cat named Snowball. O'Brien takes the case. Savoy doesn't trust the evidence to the mail. He personally flies the samples to O'Brien's lab himself, one canister holding the cat hairs, another holding Snowball's blood, determined that nothing breaks the chain of evidence between Prince Edward Island and the lab. Of the 20 hairs recovered from the jacket lining, one still has a small amount of tissue attached at the root, enough, O'Brien determines, to extract usable DNA. But a match on its own means little in court. To make the result meaningful, O'Brien has to prove Snowball's genetic profile is actually distinct from every other white cat that might plausibly have been near that jacket. His team draws blood from 20 random cats across Prince Edward Island, mapping the genetic diversity of the local cat population from scratch, something that had simply never been done before, because no one had ever needed to. The hairs from the jacket match Snowball specifically. Not just any white cat, hers. O'Brien calculates the odds of another cat sharing that exact profile at roughly 1 in 70 million. Beamish is arrested and charged with first-degree murder. His trial runs 8 weeks. At trial, defense attorney John McDougall argues plainly to the jury that without the cat evidence, the case against his client falls apart entirely. prosecutors don't rely on the cat alone. Human DNA testing from the RCMP's own lab matches blood in Duguay's car to Beamish. Bloodstains on the jacket and sneakers match Duguay. Forensic footwear analysis ties the shoes to Beamish's own gait. And there's still that letter, written 2 years earlier, laying out exactly what he said he'd do if he couldn't have her back. The jury doesn't need long. On July 19, 1996, Douglas Beamish is convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with no parole eligibility for 18 years. He appeals in 1998 and again in 1999. Both appeals fail. The following year, the science behind Snowball's testimony is published in the journal Nature, the first time in history that non-human DNA evidence had ever put a killer behind bars. Every animal DNA case that's followed in courtrooms since, anywhere in the world, traces its legal foundation back to one white cat on Prince Edward Island who never once set foot in that courtroom. Beamish's parole request in 2013 was denied. He remains in an Ontario prison to this day. If you want to uncover more dark truths and hidden histories, subscribe to FrameTale HQ, hit the notification bell, and leave your thoughts on this story in the comments below. Until next time, keep searching for the truth. Should evidence this novel, a technique used for the very first time in court, be enough on its own to convict someone of murder?